Vinta La Paz as a yellow ink. Well, when a yellow ink is done well, it is an amazing thing. The swatch and the chromatography both show some green undertones, but what doesn't occur in the writing sample? Those green undertones. We just get a beautiful golden yellow the whole time. Now, there is a little bit of tone variation by paper, but no matter what you write on, you will get great shading. And that will bring to life and give character to everything that you're writing, even if it's boring old math stuff. Now, on non-fountain pen friendly paper, this can strangely be a little aggressive getting into the paper, which was kind of surprising to me. As a yellow ink, this is the tops. In fact, as I edit this, I have ordered a bottle of this, so that's where I stand.
The pen for today is a Kaweco Sport. And now that we know my opinion on this ink, let's see how we got there by looking at the first writing sample done on Clairfontaine.
Take a look at this beautiful golden yellow that's not just setting the standard for the color we're comparing to in this video, but really setting the standard for how golden yellows should look. This does not feather, this does not spread, this does shade like there's no tomorrow. Really, there's no spot where you don't see some level of shading going on. Just take a look at subtraction on the first line. The S has light and dark tones. The U has light and dark tones. The B has light and dark. It's hard to choose a word to focus on because every letter of every word is in transition from lighter to darker or darker to lighter. This is the whole time just living on the page. This is what you want an ink to look like. Looking at the back of the page, we get no bleeding and no ghosting.
Vinta makes more than just one ink. So let's take a look at a few other inks from Vinta.
Here is Vinta Tala. Here is Vinta Sandugo. Here is Vinta Heritage Brown Panama.
The second writing sample is done in a Portage Reporter notebook.
The tone we get on the page here is just a little bit lighter than it was on the Clairfontaine. It does not feather and it does not spread. It does shade just as well as it does on the Clairfontaine. It is like the very definition of shading. Take a look at definition on the second line. Once again, I don't know that you can choose a letter in that word that does not have shading. And it's just, I love this ink. Looking at the back of the page, now I wanted to say no bleeding, but you see it does get just a little aggressive in that one spot. Other than that, really no problems, no ghosting. You could easily write back here. That little bit, I'm going to let go and I'm not even going to worry about because this ink just looks so amazing. Did that spot touch the page underneath? No, so it's nothing to worry about.
There's a lot to be learned by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down to immediately put into water to show the separation of those colors making the ink. Now the one on the right is marked with a D. This is allowed to dry for 10 minutes before it's put into water. The third writing sample is done in a national brand Steno notebook.
Here, the tone we get is a bit more orange leaning. It looks much more as an orange than it does as a golden yellow on this paper. That's a result of the tone of the paper, meaning as you would expect with a yellow ink, this is a bit more translucent than many other inks. Not a big deal. It does not feather, does not spread. It does shade all the time. You can understand the excitement. Look at understand, which is showing the shading the least of anything on here, and every word, every letter shows shading. This is the tops, baby. Looking at the back of the page, I can see a couple of spots where it's aggressive and deeper into the paper. Nowhere near coming through or touching the page underneath. Could I write back here? Absolutely, because there is no ghosting.
Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. Now, this smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. In the upper left, you can see where there is highlighter. In the upper right, that is pen flush. The lower left has a 1/3 bleach solution, and the lower right has plain old water. The next writing sample is done in a Rhodia notebook.
Here we get the same tone as the Clairfontaine. It does not feather and it does not spread. It does shade just as well as it did on the Clairfontaine. This is just great. We're using this paper to be able to see how well it stands out against a quad rule. And let me tell you, I would not expect a yellow ink. It's a golden yellow, but I would not expect this to stand out so well on the quad rule. It does. No problem. Amazing work. It does not get cut by the vertical lines as they come through the words. Nothing. This ink is strong. Looking at the back of the page, we get no bleeding, no ghosting, and we can happily continue with this ink on the back because just writing with this ink is bound to put a smile on your face.
With over 1,000 inks reviewed, let's take a look at a few more yellow inks. Here is Califolio Ochre Juan. Here is Pilot Mixable Yellow. Here is Robert Oster Honeybee. Here is Sailor Studio 670. All of the inks that you just saw have a review here on the channel. Now, the next writing sample is done in a composition lab notebook.
Here, the tone is just a little bit lighter and flatter than it was on the Clairfontaine. It does not feather and it does not spread. Do I need to note any further that it does shade very well? Take a look at note further on the second line. It just looks so good. I'm going to tell you what, I'm giving a whole letter grade to a student that uses this in their lab notebook just for how good their notes look. Even if their notes are wrong, I don't care. They're going to look so good, you're just going to want to look at them again and say, yeah, that's worth some more points. Looking at the back of the page, we get no bleeding, no ghosting, happy notes on the back of the page.
While it's nice to see inks that are in the same color family, I prefer to find inks that complement the color on the page. Here is Diamine Florida Blue. Here is Delta Red. Here is Noodler's Blue Black. Here is Organic Studios Boron Brown. The best way you can support this or any channel that you like watching is to alert the retailer of where you saw the product at time of purchase. Now, the last writing sample is done on 20-pound copy paper.
Here we get a tone that's just a little bit lighter than it was on the Clairfontaine. It does feather tiny bits. Really, you have to nitpick to go after them, but they are there. They're not conspicuous. You can see it with the S at the end of conspicuous on the second line, but not really very much. There's spread, but it's barely noticeable. The only way you notice it is if you put that and like Clairfontaine next to each other, which I'm looking at like that, but I'm not going to go ahead and degrade this ink by showing that on camera. No, thank you. This is just doing such a great job. It even shades on 20-pound copy paper. This is an amazing ink. Looking at the back of the page, you see that it does have some aggressive marks, absolutely showing its claws a little bit, but it did not bleed through touching the page underneath. I think you probably could write back here if you wanted to. I probably wouldn't because I don't write on two sides of copy paper with a fountain pen. I've just learned otherwise. You don't want to lose the important stuff.
So what nib and pen do I think are going to give the best writing experience with this ink?
This brass sport has a medium flow fine nib and really shows off the shading across all papers. Now, I was curious about the green undertones, so I tried this in a very wet fine off camera. It did darken it to make the golden more than yellow, but no green. Still fantastic. Still shaded really well. For me, I'm going to stay with this medium flow fine nib. That's where I'm going to stay with this for the mesmerizing tone and the great sunset shading that is going on all the time. I'm going to tell you, people avoid yellow inks. I know this video is going to get lower views. In fact, this part that I'm saying now isn't even going to be heard by most people. Tell me in the comments if you heard this. Say bonus in the comments if you heard it, because My God, this is a bonus video to have actually watched it. What a beautiful ink.